Hey, welcome to the demo video for Terramorph. This is the video in which I'm going to kind of walk through using the tool if you are starting from scratch. There's a couple of requirements before we get started, and one is that you need to have Docker for Windows installed and updated and running. And if you are running this on Windows, then you need to make sure you have remote script execution allowed in your PowerShell environment so that you can run the installation script. That is something that I have a link to in the README for the repository, so you can go check that out if you haven't set that up yet. Also, I want to apologize for the bad audio quality. I just don't want to go spend money on a new headset to make this video. So the first thing we're going to do is clone down the repository for Terramorph. Also, I've pre-built the image for Terramorph just because I want to save time and not sit here like waiting while the image builds. So you're going to see that in my Docker images. You'll see the base that I'm using as well as the Terramorph image has been pre-built. And I don't have any Docker images, or excuse me, Docker containers in existence yet. Also, you can see that my environment has not yet been set up. I don't have anything that is going to respond to any of the commands that we're going to be working with yet. And then another quick note is that we're going to be working with a Terraform code base that I set up just for the purpose of demoing this tool that has multiple layers in reference to the kind of layers and segments that we talked about in the other video. And in those environments, as you know, if you've worked with Terraform, you have to have, like your backend configured and your AWS profile configured. I have example files for those in the Terraform code base in the repository, but I don't want to take time to populate those on the video. So what I'm going to do is just copy some pre-populated files into those directories just so that we can kind of get up and running. So now that we've got those into place, let's set up the tool. So the full.ps1 script is going to build the image, and then it's going to create a PowerShell alias in an auto-loaded profile in your PowerShell environment that gives you access to this command. You can use tm or Terramorph for the full command. Either of those will respond. And what that's actually doing is it is invoking a Docker container and passing it in arguments relative to what directory you're currently working in. And if you don't pass it any arguments, then it just runs help and outputs that right there. So the next thing that we're going to do is try to do like a Terraform init. So let's go back to the Terraform directory, and we'll see we've got a couple of layers here. One is a network layer and the other is the application layer. So let's step into the network layer and the VPC directory. And from here you can see we don't have a .terraform directory, we don't have a .terramorph directory, nothing's really been set up yet. So since we're here, let's do an init, see what we get. So that initialized our layer, and we should be able to do a plan. Hopefully this won't take too long on video. Cool, didn't take long at all. So now that we've done an init and a plan, we don't have a .terraform directory. We have a .terramorph directory. And the reason we have that is that I don't want to have to worry about, or nor really should anyone have to worry about moving from environment to environment and getting confused about the backend configuration or any kind of variable issues or state pollution that can occur from those kinds of mistakes. So let's step into the .terramorph directory and see what we've got there. First thing you'll notice is that there's an environments directory that has, that has our dev environment in it that we're working in. And inside the dev environment, what you'll find is basically the environment name becomes your .terraform directory. So what Terramorph does is every single execution, it finds the environment that you're working in, and it navigates down through the .terramorph directory into the environments directory, and then finds that environment, moves it into the Terraform layer that you're currently working in, and renames it .terraform. And that's how all this is able to work, is that it grabs, the contents of that directory, and it checks it out of the Terramorph library into the working directory as a .terraform directory, and it does all of its work, and then it checks it back into the library and renames it back to the environment name that it initially was identified as. And that allows us to keep a really clean, working directory, so that you can change from environment to environment seamlessly without ever having to worry about cleanup or having to have really weird code designs like instantiating modules repeatedly for different environments. Like, you should only really ever have to instantiate a module one time and be able to feed it different variable files and have it be executed in different AWS accounts or AWS environments, or any cloud service provider you're working with. So that is how you would use Terramorph if you were simply working in one layer at a time, and you wanted to manipulate those layers kind of like by hand. But as we discussed in the other video, if you have a complex multi-layer, multi-segment, multi-account, limited blast radius kind of code design, setting up or tearing down full-scale environments is going to be very onerous. So if we go back to the Terraform directory, we have this test-product.yaml. And what this is this is actually a Ansible playbook. And I've got a little bit of text in here kind of commenting on what this is and how to use it. But in short, what I'm doing here is I'm calling the Terramorph Ansible role repeatedly and passing it a directory. And you see some tags in here, but I'm not actually using tags in the code base, so kind of disregard. That's in there just to add a little bit of visual clarity. But the key point that I want you to see here is that first in the playbook, I'm creating the network VPC layer, then the application test layer, and then I'm going to destroy the network VPC and application test environments that I just created. And I'm going to do this all in one playbook. The network VPC layer is like an AWS VPC with some subnets and some other junk in it, but it's just very lightweight, just as a proof of concept. And then the application test layer is like an SQSQ that is created, and those are really just there so that I can demonstrate how this kind of walks through the different layers. So what I'm going to do is run tm and the test product playbook. And then what happens when this occurs is that that argument, the test product.yaml, is being interpreted by the Docker entry point file. And the Docker entry point file is identifying that as an Ansible playbook as opposed to like a Terraform argument. And instead of invoking the Terramorph Python code, which then calls Terraform, what it does is it invokes Ansible. And Ansible calls this Terramorph role, which then invokes the Python that subprocesses out to Terraform, which is kind of complicated, but essentially that's how the whole thing works. Is that you've got Ansible calling a playbook which has a role, and that role is able to navigate through the environments and run all these commands. So from start to finish then, I might as well explain the rest of it while we're kind of waiting for this run. From start to finish on Windows, you've got a PowerShell alias that invokes a Docker container and passes an argument to an entry point file in the Docker container. And the entry point file then makes a decision to either invoke the Terramorph Python code or the Ansible binary that is inside the Docker container. And from that point, if it invokes the Terramorph Python code, The Terramorph Python code will determine that it is working in like a single layer as opposed to running a playbook, and it will check out the library for the environment that it's working in. It will do its Terraform execution, and then it will check the library, excuse me, it'll check the environment back into the library, and then that will be the end of that run. And then you've got a totally sanitized working environment once it completes its work. If it determines that an Ansible playbook has been passed in, then the Ansible playbook invokes the role, and the role invokes the Terramorph Python, and the Terramorph Python subprocesses out to Terraform and then finishes the work as we discussed just a moment ago. So we just a moment ago saw, let's follow the steps here. We've got, it's skipping some steps here, which makes this a little bit tough to read on video, of course. But it's doing a logic check in the actual Ansible role where if the destroy flag is present, then it's going to interpret that command as a destroy command. And if the destroy flag is not present, then it is going to interpret that as a create command. So that's why you kind of see some of those like skipping lines in there. The other thing that I should mention, if you want more output about what's going on here, like if you want to actually see the Terraform output within these Ansible calls, you can do that. I had just turned down the verbosity in, oh goodness, what file would that even be in? That would probably be in maybe the entry point file. How embarrassing to try to do this on film. Yeah, so if you added like if you increase the, I think there's actually only 3, if you increase the verbosity on the Ansible playbook binary call, then you would get, which is in the entry point file, by the way, then you would get increased output, and you would actually be able to see like all of the Terraform actions that are occurring within each of these tasks. So there you see the end of the Ansible playbook run. Yeah, again, fortunately, I'm sure there's a flag where I can filter out what tasks it's skipping. But what we saw was creating the network layer, creating the application layer, and then tearing down the application layer, and then tearing down the network layer. So you could have a really large playbook that creates an incredibly complex multi-environment, multi-account infrastructure. Or you could have really simple ones that just do a series of executions. This can all be tied into CI/CD pipeline type stuff to make some really neat, complex executions. And the best part, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to keep a really clean working environment so that your state is always clean and your variables are always easy to kind of understand. So if you have any questions, shoot me a message. Otherwise, I hope this video was helpful.